Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's fourth and final video. We're going to have a look at weather for the next 10 to 14 days for today's final video. Day 10 will take us to the 17th of January, and we'll be able to extend out beyond that with the extended GFS and ECM ensembles. Maybe we'll try in a couple of weeks. We'll have a look at seventeenth 2 at the end of the video. For the next 4 weeks, it gets us into the beginning of February, and I shall get on with that for you in a moment. Just to say that the first video today was our 6 AM upload. We've also released the ECM Day 42 forecast and weekend forecast too. Please like, share, subscribe on videos, and thank you so much, everybody, for doing that. Right, we're going to start off with stratospheric developments, and just to bring you an update with the latest 2 GFS runs I've had so far today. So this has been midnight GFS, and we can see that temperature at 10 HPA over the Arctic of the North Pole, of course. You're very familiar with these charts now, I'm sure. So the blue and the purple colours, these are the cold temperatures at 10 HPA over the Arctic and over North Pole too, hovering around -18 to -85, something like that. Well, let's see what happens. We have got a slight warming already taking place over Siberia. We're looking to see if we can get a southern stratospheric warming going, of course. So we're going to see the warming over Siberia intensifying through the early part of next week, not reaching SSW levels, but that's like the opening salvo, I suppose, of warming around Siberia there. Not having any impact at all on the Arctic and North Pole, really, but perhaps displacing the polar vortex a little bit at its routes over towards the Atlantic and Greenland side of the Arctic. But generally kept at bay around the edges of the Arctic and of the North Pole. Heading on into the more extended range, we find that the warming begins to ease off a little bit before perhaps starting to re-intensify again as we head through the third week of January. That's how we end up to the 23rd of January. Excuse me, we look like that. And it appears that warming is beginning to re-intensify a little bit towards the Siberian side of the Arctic. We have got a displacement event now taking place of the polar vortex. The displacement of the PV at its roots is taking place over Canada, North America and the North Atlantic as well. But no sign of like a particular impact from any warming of the stratosphere into the North Pole. Certainly no sign of a reverse of solar winds there. No sign of a split of PV either. Right, that's that one done. Let's have a look at the very latest GFS run, which is the 6Z. Again, currently very cold temperatures in the stratosphere over the North Pole at 10 HPA. There's the first opening salvo warming taking place over the next few days over Siberia, not having much impact when it comes to the Arctic and to the North Pole. Heading into the extended range, we do see perhaps a little bit more of a warming of the stratosphere taking place on this GFS run. So the red colours start to appear around the 20th of January over Siberia. What happens with that? Well, it looks like it carries on, actually re-intensifies around the 23rd. So that is a proper warming of the stratosphere going on there. That is reaching southern stratospheric warming temperature levels. Only temperature. It's not really impacting into the North Pole at that point. It's certainly not splitting the polar vortex or reversing the solar winds. But over Siberia, the temperature is reaching SSW levels in those deep red colours. Where that will go beyond that, of course, into the final week of January, we can't say, because that's where we start. Would that penetrate into the North Pole? Would it split the PV at its roots? You know, reverse solar winds, we can't say, because that's as far as we get to. But certainly up to that point, a very significant warming of the stratosphere taking place over the North Pole. So it remains a slow burner. I've been saying it's going to be a slow burner. It continues to be a slow burner. We should keep updated with stratospheric developments as we progress on through this January. Central temperatures is still not updating, so our latest number is still sitting at 6.5, which is 2.7 degrees above average. That is provisional up to the 3rd of January. We haven't had an update since then. I thought we'd have a look at January CT back through the ages, do a little bit of a CT Saturday. The central temperature, of course, is the oldest and most reliable temperature record anywhere on Earth. It goes all the way back to 1659, or a bit further back you go, the more unreliable it becomes. Now, if we scroll down through the years, we can see that last January came out at 4.7. January 2021 was actually quite a chilly January at 3.2. It was our coldest January since 2010, actually. Our last properly cold January was 2010 at 1.5. That was a very cold month, although not sub-zero. About that in a moment. And we also had quite a chilly January in 2013 as well at 3.5. There's a 2-week cold snap there with the first and final weeks quite a lot quite a lot milder. Very mild January in 2020 at 6.4. That was the polar vortex of doom January, of course. Another really mild January in 2018 at 5.3. 2016 at 5.5. Mild January to 2014, 5.7. That was another mild one as well. January 2011 was a bit on the chilly side at 3.7. It followed on from the December to Remember, which was sub-zero CT month, and then we had an exceptionally mild February in that winter. So January 2011 was like a recovery month, if you like, from the big freeze, or a transitional month from the big freeze in December to the very mild February. 2007 was exceptionally mild January at 7.0. I wonder whether this January could be challenging that one. The warmest January on record, actually, is a very long time ago. It's back in 1916 at 7.6. That was a very, very strange winter. So what happened with that winter is that it began early with a very cold November at 2.8. Then we had a mild December at 5.3. An exceptionally mild, record-breaking mild. It has not yet been beaten, despite all of the warm winter we've had lately. It hasn't been beaten with 7.6 in January of 1916. Then it turns much colder into February at 3.8 and has a very cold March at 3.3. So that was a very, very old winter in 1915, 1916. But that is the warmest January on record. It has not been beaten, as I say, throughout the entire CT record. Then the next year, 1916-17, of course, was a very cold winter, middle of the First World War. December at 1.9, January at 1.6, and February at 0.9. A really cold winter through the middle of the First World War. What about more recently? Well, last time I had a sub-zero CT January. It's a very long time ago. There it is, back in 1979. The last time we had a sub-zero CT January at minus 0.4 in 1979, I was like 2 years old then. Well, 1 and a bit. So I was like 1 year, 3 months old. And bear in mind, I'm 45 now. That's how long it's been since we've had a sub-zero CT January. So January 1985 was quite cold at 0.9, and of course January 1987 was very cold as well at 0.8. So they almost got to a sub-zero CT January, but just not quite. And there's not really been much ever since then, to be honest, other than 2010. Which came out 1.5, you know, very rare now to get a really cold January, never mind a sub-zero CT January. I suspect January 2023 will be another mild one to add to the list. What about the coldest January? So we've looked at the mildest January on record, but what about the coldest? Well, for that we have to go a long way back. So we go all the way back into the 1700s. Actually, so actually we go back to 1600. So you have a very, very cold January in 1684 at minus 3.0. Excuse me. And they have another very, very cold January in 1716, because we're in a little ice age at this point, more the minimum at minus 2.0. There were still very mild Januaries even in this era though. For example, we had January 1736 at 6.4. We had January 1733 at 6.9. The 1730s are an unusually warm decade. We have like a cold start to the decade of 1730s, where we have a cold January there at 1.9 and another quite cold winter in 1732. Then the rest of the 1730s is actually mild, very, very mild decade, up there with like current warmth, really. Very, very strange and very bizarre what happened in the 1730s. It all reverses abruptly in 1740, which is almost the coldest January on record, but not quite. That has a January CT of minus 2.8, followed by a February CT of minus 1.6. And that does actually make winter of 1740 just about the coldest on record. I think. But actually, the coldest January on record is in 1795. This is the coldest January on record at minus 3.1 in 1795, followed by a cold February again at 0.8, and December has CT of 3.7. So the coldest January on record is 1795. I don't think we'll be beating that anytime soon somehow. And of course, we can't finish this without looking at the daddy of cold winter. So how does that compare? How does 1963 compare? There it is. So there's the daddy of cold winter, 62, 63. January 1963 has a central temperature of minus 2.1. So it's the coldest January since 1740. Followed by another sub-zero CT month in February at minus 0.7. Of course, also has a cold December at just 1.8. So, not that long ago, I mean, it's within living memory that we have the daddy of cold winters, but since then, you know, the cold winters have been in increasingly short supply, particularly cold Januaries. We have, of course, had the sub-zero CT December in 2010, and we had a sub-zero CT February in 1986. So, you know, we have had sub-zero CT months, but for January, we haven't had one since 1979. Presumably, we're going to have one at some point, even with the warming trend. You think that at some point we'll get a blocking area of high pressure set up over Scandinavia that will deliver us a sub-zero CT January. But for now, the wait goes on. We're certainly not going to get one in 2023, that's for sure. Hey, we enjoyed that CT Saturday. We do that, you know, on occasion. Right, these are the GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. On it texturing again today. So red line is a Virginia upper air temperature average for Kettering. And we're starting off above average with the upper air temperatures at the moment. They have to cool down a little bit into the beginning of next week. Then they'll push back up again with another area of low pressure on Tuesday. Very up and down, very zonal until the middle of January. Then after that, there might be a little bit of a cooling trend starting to appear. Though it looks like we might be losing that zonal sine wave into the second half of January with the green line, which is the operational GFS run, going a little bit colder than average on these 6Z3. If I show you the midnight run, you'll see that the operational run did become quite a dramatic cold outlier, and I'll show you in a few moments. Now eventually the GFS midnight run really drops a lot. Even ignoring that though, I think there could be a little bit of a cooling trend appearing there through the third week of January. I have been saying that the next cold prospects are likely to be into the second half of January, and that might be an indication of it. Certainly before then, we're very zonal, you know, very up and down with the warmer and cooler and warmer and cooler, warmer and cooler and warmer sectors alternating. So up to middle of January, it's straightforwardly zonal. After that, into the third week of the month, we might be seeing a cooling trend, but keep in mind, you know, that is extended range, so it's a long way away and whatnot. In terms of snow row, that's how it's so a few snow spikes appearing there into the second half of January, especially around the 17th to the 19th. If we go a little bit further north, say to Leeds, there it looks a little bit more impressive with snow row from around the 15th to like the 19th of January. Quite a few of the ensemble members are producing snow bears. Some of them quite large snow spikes. They're outliers, of course. But there might be a little bit of snow into the third week of January as the jet stream begins to push a bit further southwards. Certainly before then, not much doing away from Scottish mountains. Temperature anomalies from the 7th to the 9th to the 15th of January, coming out milder than average, and precipitation anomalies from the 7th to 15th January, wetter than normal. Latest info out from earthnorthschool.net shows got a big area of low pressure to the west of country. That's driving more Atlantic weather systems into country, so showers along as well as rain, but at least it's pretty mild. Right, let's start going through chart data. It's our latest UK Met Euro around North for midnight on Tuesday, so a little bit of transient ridge building through the country around, only ahead of an next area of low in the Atlantic though, back into wet and windy weather through Tuesday itself. And then on through the remainder of next week, low pressure keeps coming, driving in further bouts of rain from off the Atlantic, showers or longer spells of rain. And as the jet stream starts to ease a little bit further southwards by next weekend, possibly the chance of some of this wet weather turning to snow up in the north. Icon looks like that again. Low pressure driving in from off the Atlantic as we go through the middle part and second half next week. Further bouts of wet and windy weather to come by next weekend. That area of low pressure just beginning to move into the North Sea, starting to turn wind into something of a colder northwesterly. And again, the jet stream just starting to ease a bit further south as well. Going on to the cold side of the jet there, which means that showers could start to turn wintry up in the north. Right, this is that GFS midnight run that becomes a cold outlier. Let's see how that happens. So we start off again, low pressure driving in from off the Atlantic, bringing lots of bouts of wind and rain through the middle and second half of the week. A little bit of a cooler interlude there as we begin next weekend, but we're back into milder southwesterlies by the second half of the weekend. Then into towards day 10, we bring more low pressure in off the Atlantic Ocean. The high pressure then starts to ease out to our northwest, and we turn wind into the north. So this is how the cold weather begins with the GFS midnight run. High pressure pulling further away from us, low pressure Scandinavian winds turning into a colder northwesterly, and eventually that turns into a proper northerly. So going through the third week of January, we're a long way out now, 9th of January, so 300 hours away, but going further through the third week of January, we turn it properly cold, winds in from the north, and cold air plunging southwards across the country. Then heights rising to our north, so we start to reach the Azores high towards Scandinavian and ultimately Siberian high, and that begins to turn winds into an east or a northeasterly, and with low pressure sitting over the low countries, that could start to bring snow into more eastern parts of the country. That's how the upper air temperatures look. Pretty cold there. So a prolonged cold spell starts to set up with the GFS midnight run through the third week of January. Keep in mind that is a cold outlier though. What about the 6th then? That's how it's looking again on Tuesday. Wet wind weather coming in from off the Atlantic. Looks quite stormy there early on Wednesday, and further low pressure driving in for the second half of next week as well. Then as we go into next weekend, heights begin to rise to our south, so that starts to drag up milder air from the southwest once again next weekend, before we start to pull wind back into the west of the northwest by day 10. That's the chart board day 10, 17th of January. We're bringing a colder northwesterly wind then. Winds going into the north into the 18th of January, so increasing risk of wintry conditions, especially in the north, but maybe not exclusively so. Upper air temperature looking cold right way through the UK and Ireland, and then more low pressure coming into that cold air. That could be quite interesting from a wintry perspective. That low pressure diving southwards through the country at the very end of the GFS 6Z run, turning wind back into the north. Definitely a colder and more wintry flavour on both of those GFS runs for the third week of January. So let's wait and see about that. That will not be down to the warming events in the stratosphere, by the way. That's nothing to do with that. Because up to that point, you know, the warming has not had any impact on the polar vortex and whatnot. It might, I suppose, be a little bit down towards the displacement of the PB, but I'll be a bit dubious about that. I think it's just, you know, variations within the weather and within the weather models. If you enjoyed this video, please you like, share, subscribe, please you share both of that work, drop a comment, let us know what you think about this and all of our videos. Thank you so very much. I'm finally caught up with the comments from the New Year, so I was up at 4 AM this morning going through the comments. I set aside 2 hours and went through all the comments. So, you know, if you've been waiting for a reply or at least a heart, then hopefully, you know, you've seen that I have replied. Right, GM, again, low pressure coming in off the Atlantic on Tuesday, bringing more wet, windy weather, stays unsettled through next week. Low pressure continuing to drive in from off the Atlantic Ocean. Eventually, projection is moving southwards, though. By next weekend, climate projection begins to head down toward Biscay, taking these areas of low pressure with them. It means that for the northern half of the country, the air starts to turn colder. So on the northern side of these areas of low pressure, there's an increased risk of snow around days 7, 8, 9, 10. Further south, probably just cold rain, to be honest. But definitely the jet stream is moving southwards. A little bit of a northwest-southeast alignment to the jet stream, and these areas of low pressure are starting to pull southwards as well. That might be starting to set up some colder weather for the 3rd week of January. And then the ECM WF once more, Atlantic onslaught pattern through the coming week with lots of showers and longer spells of rain. Eventually, similar to all of the other model output, the jet stream to the black line starts to ease southwards, so start taking these areas of low pressure southwards with them, well, with the jet stream, and pulling some colder air, especially to the northern half of the country, on the northern side of these areas of low pressure. Back to look as we get to day 10, which is the 17th of January. It looks like that low pressure is about to start moving southwards to me. So look where the low pressure is. On the 16th of January, the low pressure is just there, somewhere between Greenland and Iceland. By the 17th of January, that low pressure looks like it's starting to move south, doesn't it? If it goes in that sort of direction, it would start to pull cold air in from the north, probably. So again, that might be setting up something a little bit colder for the 3rd week of January, as the Azores high, this ridge here, pulls out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. This is a precipitation forecast based on that ECM run from Tometeo.com. Plenty of showers and long spells going to come over the next few days. Look at this massive wet weather coming in on Tuesday. And that could produce some quite significant snow for parts of Scotland for a while on Tuesday as well. Back sunshine showers Wednesday, and then more low pressure rattling through during Thursday and Friday as well. That's a nasty little area of low pressure next weekend. That's Saturday. Taking heavy rain in across England, whereas on the northern side of that, there is a risk of some quite significant. So bear in mind, the GFS doesn't show that at all. The GFS just has southwesterly winds established. So there's a bit of uncertainty for next weekend. But if that came off, it would deliver some snow to parts of Wales, Northern England, and also the Midlands. And then beyond that, we just start turning things colder, really, as the jet stream eases south as we go onto the cold side of the jet. The showers turn increasingly wintry, particularly so in the north, but even in the south, there's a suggestion there by daytime that there could be a little bit of wintriness with the precipitation. So just a generally colder feel to a lot of these charts by the 3rd week of January. These are the updates on the table within the ECM ensembles today for day 10, which gets us to the 17th of January. 13 members of the ECM, it's from the Iceland Met Office, 13 members of the ECM ensembles with low pressure dominating over the top of the country. There is a mid-Atlantic ridge row that's starting to force some cooler air into that area of low pressure. 9 just here again with high pressure in the Atlantic. Low pressure is over to the East Country, very unsettled, and starting to bring some cold air into that low. We've got 9 here with low pressure more towards our west, and that will be keeping us a little bit milder with winds to the southwest. We've got 8 with low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south, so that's reasonably mild up to day 10 as well. We've got 7 low pressure through the country, mid-Atlantic ridge, so again that's bringing some cooler air into that area of low. And then 5 with high pressure to our south-southeast, low pressure to our north, the northeast, and in the middle of the Atlantic as well. That's quite messy, but probably still relatively mild to that point. In 2 weeks' time, these are the options that we've got. It gets us to the 22nd of January. 10 members of the ECM ensembles with high pressure in the middle of the Atlantic and ridging up towards Scandinavia. That could start to bring in some colder air from the northeast. We've got 10 with high pressure in the middle of the Atlantic. Low pressure is to our east. Winds will be coming down from the north with that, in line with the GFS operationals, I suppose. We've got another 10 here with high pressure in the Atlantic and over Scandinavia, ridge through the country, probably drying quite cold with that. We've got 9 with low pressure to the north of Scotland. That's keeping things more from the Atlantic. Although probably a little bit of northwest southeast alignment to wind projection could be turning cooler. We've got 8 with low pressure over the country. That can be very unsettled and probably quite mild winds in the southwest, and 4 with low pressure through the country, combined with the Mid-Atlantic ridge, probably bring some colder air into that area of low pressure. There's a bit of a hint here, but the third week of January might produce something a little bit colder. So finally, it's a 500 millibar high tolerance breakdown into week periods. The first week period takes from the 7th to the 13th of January. The coming week looks very unsettled, and low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. It is going to be pretty mild. As we go through to week 2, we look like that. It's the 14th to the 20th of January. High pressure to our south, low pressure to the north. That keeps wind in west-southwest. That's going to be quite mild as well. Big change week 3, it's going to be the 23rd, 27th of January. High pressure is dominating then from the Atlantic up towards Scandinavia as well. We will probably be bringing a wind from an east or northeasterly direction, especially in the south. That could be going a little bit colder there. And then in week 4, we look like this. It's the 28th of January to 3rd of February. Low pressure to the west, high pressure to the east. So probably going milder with winds in from the south. However, the high pressure is basically centering over Scandinavia there. So if we would start to send this area of low in that direction, we will probably start to bring in an easterly wind, and of course that could be turning things a lot colder into early February. So that's a little bit inconclusive, I think, that one. It could go in either direction. I think the third week of January is what we've got to focus on for now, and of course a bigger picture remains what's happening in the stratosphere. Right, we're done. If you enjoyed the video, then please you like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for everybody's doing that. Why not drop a comment and let us know what you think about this and all of our videos. Thank you so very much, everybody, for doing that. And don't forget to tell your friends and family to subscribe as well. We've only got around 10 subscribers now. Can you believe it? To get ourselves to 15.3k. So please give us a sub. Thank you so much, everybody, for doing that. Right, so just coming up tomorrow, let's start off with the 6 AM upload. We've got our first spring update coming up tomorrow. Well. And there'll be a 10 to 14 there as well. And we're bringing you update with all of the latest developments for afternoon after the spring update. But for today's 10 to 14 there and for today's videos and content, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and bye for now.